I can proudly stand here today and say promises made, promises kept. When I look back at our first year of government, when I look at everything we've accomplished, it's amazing. I know that we have the best team for the job, the best political team I've ever seen. My friends, it's been around 30 years. I've never seen a political team that we have down at Queen's Park.
Well, Premier Doug Ford's team no longer includes his Chief of Staff, Dean French. Late Friday, French resigned hours after Ford rescinded two controversial appointments linked to his former Chief of Staff. The appointments were announced the same day as the big cabinet shuffle that aimed to change the channel on weeks of backlash over budget cuts. Welcome back to Power and Politics in the Power Panel with Stockwell Day, Brad Levine, and Yolande James. Yolande, I'll start with you. What do you think the implications of Premier Ford losing his Chief of Staff will be for his government?
Well, I mean, a Chief of Staff or a Premier is a very, very important key role based on trust. And when you look at the job description, that person should be, of course, number one, have trust with the Premier, obviously, have that person's back, tell them the truth, even when they don't really want to hear it. And also, big one here, not be part of the problem and cause distractions. And from what I understand, without having, obviously, I don't know Mr. French, but whether it be with those appointments that he's had to rescind on, whether it be with the fact that he's also was implicated with the Commissioner of Police appointment as well, he's a part of causing more problems, and he's supposed to be taking problems off the Premier's desk, not to mention the fact that things are clearly not going well for the government, not just looking at polls, but if you're resetting your government with a cabinet shuffle only a year in and changing your Chief of Staff, clearly you're trying to get things back on track. And there's never just, I don't believe that there's one person or one issue when things are off bar. There usually are a few things that need to be adjusted, and clearly a new inner circle or Chief of Staff is key here.
Was there any alternative, Brad? I mean, by the time those and the appointments were, one was his wife's, Dean French's wife's cousin, the other was a friend of his son's. Once that became public and then they were rescinded, was there any alternative other than this resignation?
Well, he could have been fired. That would have been the alternative. The outcome would have been roughly the same, but it would have been one being pushed versus one being jumped. And it was a matter of hours on that Friday. Really was, which cycle is this going to hit? Is this going to be on the 2 o'clock radio news? Is it going to be on the 3 o'clock?
Turns out it was just after 7, right after the show.
Yeah, that's right. So they hung in there until the show was over. But it certainly made news straight after. To Yolande's point, staff should never be in the story. He certainly was, not just with this huge mistake like this. You can't even begin to start justifying this. And the reason why the appointments were so toxic is because it fundamentally goes against the Doug Ford brand. That is, elites looking out for themselves, insiders picking your pocket, taking your money. And here we have the government who found, lots of money to break contracts, lots of money to, talk about things like beer in corner stores and such. But, they're cutting municipalities, they were doing all these kinds of things. And then all of a sudden, friends and insiders get the plum jobs. The plum jobs, just so that folks at home know, come with $165,000 annual salaries. These aren't just, can you sit on this board of the government or this committee, this advisory body? No, these were full-paying jobs, and they were very good ones. And these individuals, at least one of them, was horribly qualified for it. But the point here is that it runs counter to him. But this still gives the opposition, this gives Andrew Horwath and the NDP still like weeks, right? He promised to clean it up. He promised to get rid of the gravy train, and yet under his watch it was happening. Now they got caught. And the guy no longer is on the taxpayer salary, but nonetheless, it happened under his watch. And had this happened under previous Liberal or NDP governments, the Ford's people would have had, their heads would have exploded. So certainly he's done damage, not just because of the corruption of the appointments, but because the corruption of the appointments goes counter so much to Doug Ford's brand.
If you accept, Stockwell, that there is a problem, will Dean French's resignation help solve that problem?
Well, it will, Vashi, and in a day of disclosures, I can tell you that about 19 years ago, when I was launching as leader of the Canadian Alliance, the campaign in Ontario, Dean French played a key role for us in terms of increasing our vote in Ontario and the fundraising, and just did a great job. He volunteered on that campaign, really understands the province well. And we also understand that a chief of staff job is probably the toughest in all of government. The term longevity and chief of staff usually don't appear in the same Google search. And certainly that's the case here, as it was for the Prime Minister's chief of staff not long ago. A few minutes ago, I was leaning with Monsieur Chrétien, and now I'm leaning with Yolande when she quite rightly makes the point. It just doesn't matter if you are beginning to draw hostile fire as the chief of staff and the premier or whoever your boss is getting caught in that crossfire, then you simply have to make a decision. And I think he made the right decision here. Wish him well in wherever he is going. But that is the tough spot of a chief of staff, and that's the way it goes in this business.
Well, that was a monster mistake. That was a significant mistake, those appointments. And Ford should have fired him and not let him resign. I mean, there's a close enough relationship to say you're being fired, you don't have the right to resign, so that Ford's in charge. This one was just, well, look, I'm getting in hot water here, but those appointments were very toxic. And it's not just there's the year churn. This guy was let no longer chief of staff on Friday night because he did something that was very corrupt. He's appointed his friends to key jobs.
Yolande wants to jump in.
But I was just going to say that regardless of whether he fired him or not, the damage was done in terms of what he did, in terms of Doug Ford's going to have to defend his judgment of even keeping him on as long as he did, given that there were a few offenses.
Yeah, there's a pretty heightened level of awareness
so it's
public
not just
even of who he is.
It's exactly, because that's another good point. Generally, anyways, in the school of politics that I went to, you don't know, or the public doesn't really know this chief of staff to premiers. That's a person that is more so behind the scenes. But it all depends on how he's going to handle it from here. I think that it'll be important in his next choice that he is very clear as to trying to reclaim the brand that Mr. French clearly heard that Brad was speaking to earlier.
I just have a few seconds left. Final word to you, Stockwell.
Well, I think Yolanda's point underlined something you said, Vashi, that the next choice obviously will be key. And certainly whoever that is going to start the process again, and we'll probably hope to be able to keep her head down, or his head down, whoever is the choice, because as Yolande said, that is a position when you start to draw attention. You can pretty well set your watch on when you're going to be exiting. And just
I have a few seconds, if you had a word of advice for the Ford government, Stockwell, right now, in this so-called reset, what would it be?
The same as I said to Doug Ford just after the last election. He got zero good media while he was running for the leadership. He got zero good media after he achieved it. He got zero good media while he was running in the election. He got zero good media after running. So in a heightened atmosphere where it's tough for a conservative leader to get, quote, good media, and you can take that any way you like, it's just stick, as he said in the blurb you just showed, stick to your promises. At the end of the day, the end of the term, if you keep your promises, the people who voted for you are probably going to vote for you again.
All right, I have to leave it there. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to the Power Panel this evening, Yolande James, Brad Levine, and Stockwell Day. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.